I'll bet you my mom is faster than your mom. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect as usual. Okay, today is Wednesday. That means tomorrow is Thursday, which means 6 a.m. Thursday morning. We've got coffee and coaches conference call. These calls have been killer. We've been going long and hard on those things too. So a lot of great people showing up, a lot of great questions. Please join us if you would like. Just post your coffee prep and send me a tag on the Instagram and we will let you in. How about that? That seems fair. Okay, Wednesday, always tight. Got to go right into the Q&A. Today's Q&A comes from Austin, and it's a little bit different question, which is kind of cool. This is about a population that is kind of underserved, I think. Austin says, I work with a fair number of elderly individuals. One common issue with this population is fall risk, which has been tied to a loss of power production, aka compression, with age. How can we make a positive impact with these individuals via your model? What compressive elements would you target? Okay. So we got to clarify a concept right off the bat. Force production is great. We've got a number of people at iFast and our share of retirees, if you will, that come in and work really, really hard. They can rip a couple 100 pounds off the floor any day of the week, which is really cool, and we're very proud of them. But when we're talking about power production, what we have to start to think about is the power that we're demonstrating is the ability to go from compression to expansion to compression, or vice versa, expansion to compression to expansion. The ability to shift from the compression to expansion very, very quickly is going to be our representation of power. One of the things we have to recognize is that force production is demonstrated during this compressive strategy, but the velocity, the speed that somebody needs to move is actually demonstrated during the expansion strategies. And so what a lot of people are lacking is the ability to release the compression quickly enough, expand to allow, say, a stepping reaction to occur to protect themselves from the fall, or for anyone to actually change direction and maintain their balance. These strategies need to be in play. And so step one for this population that you're talking about, Austin, we want to make sure that they can expand, so we do have the velocity available to us. And so depending on the level of the individual that you're working with, so this is going to be example heavy here as we go through this. I want to show you some low level stuff, and then we'll move towards things that are a little bit more dynamic. And then at some point in time, you're just going to treat these people like you would any other athlete, which is actually kind of cool, because there's nothing wrong with these people. They just need to move through a progression depending on what their initial conditions are. So what we may do is we actually throw them down on the table, and we may actually have to teach them how to capture some form of expansion. And so we might actually do this passively. Initially, we'll put them in static positions. We might actually use some form of implement to create this reciprocal compression expansion through the axial skeleton, using extremity positions to put them in force production on one side, expansion on the other. We might move them into sideline, which is a great place to start to restore expansion strategies. Because what this is actually going to lead into is we'll get them down on the floor, or like I said, depending on your environment that you're working in, Austin, you would have like a mat table available to you to work on some of these things. But this is where we're going to start to work on some rolling activities. We want to make sure that we're driving these rolls with lower extremity and upper extremity drivers, because we never know what the situation may be. So let's just consider the fact that, okay, somebody does fall. They have to be able to move about. They have to be able to roll, to change positions. They have to be able to get themselves back up off the floor, which is a big challenge under some circumstances. So this is one of the reasons why we might use, say, crawling progression. So we'll use quadruped activities and actually work on some of these crawling elements. So consider the fact that somebody falls, they have to roll from their back to their belly, or vice versa. They have to be able to crawl over to a piece of furniture that might actually help them go from the ground all the way back up to standing. Half kneeling activities are actually great because what we can actually do is we can create this influence of moving into and out of the cut. And so the progression that you're looking at right now is actually the shape change that we would promote through the axial skeleton if we were moving into and then out of a cut. And so we can actually do this progressively, so we can actually capture the physical shapes that our client may need to change direction, and then we can take this and we can move this into a standing variation where we can actually move them into a cutting situation. Speaking of standing, we go into standing activities. We can use supported activities to help promote and maintain expansion as they're learning how to lower their center of gravity. So we talk about level changes with our athletes. We got the same situation with our elderly population. So we'll start with extremity supported type activities. We'll move to single leg supported activities as well, to eventually where we go to an unsupported situation, and then we're going to play with stances. So we're going to put them in staggered stance, and we'll put them in a side split or whatever we may want to do, and just work on that, so working from static positions towards dynamic. I'm going to talk about a box squat here. So when we talk about level changes, box squats are the best thing going, because we can actually start to manage some of these internal pressures that we always talk about. And we just start them from a higher box, and we slowly bring them down to the lower box, to eventually this becomes just the old school get up and go. So they're going to come up from the box, they're going to get up, and they're going to try to move as quickly as they can across the room. Now, one of the things that we do with athletes is we want to teach them how to use an oscillatory impulse. So they have to learn how to create the compression, expansion, compression strategies as well, because that's how they're going to produce force. So this doesn't change. So we would use something a little bit more high velocity, a little bit more load, a little bit more challenging stance. What we're going to do with our elderly folks is we're going to start them in these static positions with variations in stance, but we're still going to use the release move. So they're going from compression to expansion to compression again. So this is a great way to introduce this. It does challenge their balance. They have to bring themselves back to a controlled center of gravity. So again, very, very valuable here. Once they've demonstrated all of these things, now we're just going to take away as many constraints as we can, and we want to start to build some speed. And so the easiest way to do this is to unweight them just a little bit. So we're going to use like a banded step up here, and we're going to work on some of the velocity. So a quick step, the step up makes it a little bit easier. It reduces some of the forces that they'll have to absorb. The band pull down reduces some of the gravity as well, allows them to expand a little bit more effectively, which will allow them to demonstrate this velocity. And then, like I said, we just move them to the ground, and we start to throw like a multi-directional stepping or multi-directional lunging progression at them. But the point being is we want to think about being as progressive as possible, being as creative as possible, make it as challenging to their appropriate level. So one of the things that we want to do eventually is to allow them to absorb more force. And so this is eventually going to be some of our step down progressions. We can make it as coordinative as we want to and challenging as we want to with changes of direction and such. Eventually what this is all going to turn into is some form of progressive step up. We're going to progress them into medicine ball work. And like I said, we're eventually just going to treat them like an athlete. The thing that I want you to recognize is like I said, your only limitation is your creativity, and then a little bit of understanding about how we're going to move from compression to expansion to compression strategies. So we don't have to treat these folks any differently than anyone else. We just have to grade the activities to the appropriate level. So Austin, I hope that's helpful for you. I hope the examples are useful. If not, and you got more questions, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning on the Coffee and Coaches conference call.